This is Bitnar Talks, the engineer takes on construction. Episode 11. Hi, I'm Piotr Bitnar. Each day I help my clients plan and design building projects through Bitnar Limited, a consulting chartered structural engineer's practice. My biggest passion and the cornerstone on which I've built my business is finding clever solutions for construction projects. I am a chartered structural engineer and a budding software developer, so you can rest assured that I will strive to talk about the best practices and the use of new technologies in the industry. And if you're embarking on a construction project or are involved in planning, designing and building the world around us, you'll find this podcast useful. Approved documents, sneak peek. Hi there, how are you? Welcome back to the Bitnar Talks, your favorite podcast on all matters of architecture, engineering and construction. It is Thursday the 4th of August 2024 and I am glad to be back with you with the 11th episode and the start of the series talking about approved documents. I had a little break, my half term if you like, the time between my little one birthday lasting circa 4 days with in-laws, and Easter break, another 4 days of beautiful family time. By the way, the in-laws are great, definitely the keepers, as the wife is. I'm back with you to keep on delivering on the promise of the new episode issue most weeks of the year. I've just closed the series of the plan of work and now I want to start with the series on approved documents. There seems to be an awful lot of confusion around the requirements, whys and hows of the building regulation regime, which I will try to straighten up for you. To make matters more complicated with the onset of the Building Safety Act, giving more clarity on the responsibilities around construction projects and special consideration for the higher risk buildings, we are slowly entering the era where professionalism and competence of people involved in the AEC industry is hopeful for the positive change. As of yet, there is not much of a bite of the legislation, although I can see more considerate and careful approach throughout the board. Interestingly, however, the competent people, as they are now called, will not command greater power in relation to approved documents. What is also interesting, the competent people may now fall victim to either bad advice contained within the approved documents or its integration with other aspects of design. After all, we live in the world ordered by the legislation, and the last time I checked, the approved documents are only guidance, but the guidance used as a checklist by the building control inspectors, however you call them now, which may blindly require you to do the wrong thing, but for the most part will certainly require you to do the onerous thing people who wrote it consider right at the time of writing. Alright, so let us unpack it a little bit. So without further ado, let's dive into the sneaky peek on the approved documents. The purpose of this material is to give you the general appreciation of the requirements put on you by approved documents. The approved documents form the primary source of the information prepared by the Secretary of State describing how the building regulations requirements can be discharged, how the requirements can be met in practice. There are 18 of them, 17 covering all 18 requirements of building regulation, plus materials and workmanship guidance. They are treated as guidance by the legislator, but generally taken as a gospel by the building control. They form checklist tables for most inspectors I ever came across. I will start the main part of this podcast by telling you where these approved documents are coming from and give you the idea how they relate to the reading of the Building Regulations 2010. Then I will say a bit about each and every one of them in the broadest terms possible. The following podcast episodes will address each of them one by one in depth and in detail. The purpose of this particular episode is to give you a general appreciation and introduction, if you wish, of the subject. Alright then, let's get on to it. There are many laws that guide our everyday, of which we are very often less than familiar. Notwithstanding, we carry on with the dealings of every day, often unscathed by this ignorance. After all, most laws are the inculcation of common sense and ethical behavior, seldom thought about in foresight, but rather as a failure of human behavior and the lessons learned in the hindsight. I'm not a barrister, but seeing how the law is applied and going through some legal acts, it certainly looks this way. The Building Regulations 2010 is born from the Building Act 1984. The Building Act 1984 puts together previous legislation concerning building environment together and gives the appropriate national authority the right to make building regulations and give exemptions, as well as provide practical guidance by approving documents and standards for general use. I will cite you a part of the Building Act 1984 that I find quite interesting. Open quote, "A failure on the part of a person to comply with an approved document does not of itself render him liable to any civil or criminal proceedings." End quote. It is certainly useful to research and go to approved documents for guidance, as relying on the approved documents may be useful in court, but having other views on the matters contained within the guidance is not disqualified. On the other hand, not relying on the approved document may stall the process for approval, as inspectors have no other means to verify the correctness of your project. This creates an unhealthy relationship between achieving compliance with an approach that is not within the approved documents, or circumstances that none of the documents foresees, yet the building control officer will not allow for the solution to be put in place. Taking non-compliance with the approved documents does not mean directly the project is not compliant with the building regulations, and taking the building control is not liable for the wrong use of the wrong approach of the approved documents. I do not see the reason why construction should be constrained by such approach. The approach of tick-boxing the guidance of approved documents rather than relying on sound judgment of competent people who take legal responsibility for the safety and compliance of the project. Yet, the regime is different, and until the power of design and construction is solely vested in the hands of competent people for buildings not considered high risk, we will continue to participate in the tick-box exercise, even if our professional opinion, scientific argument and research says otherwise. There are many approved documents, guidance, codes and standards, but in this series we will look closer into the series of documents called the approved documents. The series of guidance documents released by the Department of Leveling Up, Housing and Communities, widely accessible by the general public and widely used as a gospel by the local and approved inspectors. The documents follow the Building Regulation 2010 Schedule 1 requirements. These requirements are as follows. The requirement number 1, structure. This part deals with the structural safety of the buildings and gives plenty of guidance on traditional and non-engineered building construction. What does non-engineered mean? It means buildings that by the size and the localized risk they pose to people, generally a single family, can be constructed following simple prescribed solutions. This guidance concerns of three aspects. Loading. The structure must be strong enough to withstand all the vertical and horizontal forces, and it needs to integrate well with the ground movement, meaning the interaction of the structure with the ground throughout the lifetime of the building will not impair that building safety. And the aspect number 3, disproportionate collapse. Following the tragedy of Ronan Point, disproportional collapse, we need to think about how buildings stay together when accidents happen. Off to requirements now. Requirements B, fire. This part deals with what it says on the tin really, fire safety of the buildings, and looks at aspects of means of warning and escape, things like fire hit alarms and how can people evacuate the building safely. Internal fire spread, which in turn parts into two ways. Fire spread throughout the linings, treats on minimizing the spread of fire due to the way the internal structure is finished. Wallpapers. Well, in some countries or some people like to put carpets on the walls, which isn't really great for the... Well, it's great for the internal fire spread, but not really for the safety of the place. And the internal fire spread throughout the structure. We need to make sure the structure maintains its stability and is sound for the given fire scenarios, and that the building, all buildings, are compartmentalized and protected with sprinkler systems where feasible and where needed. We need to think about the external fire spread also, making sure the Great Fire of London 1666 does not happen again in London as well as elsewhere. And need to think about access and facilities for the fire services. Well, fire will not extinguish itself too quickly, and people who save our lives and structures should be able to do it as safely as reasonably practicable, right? Then we go to requirement C, which is site preparation and resistance to contaminants and moisture, which involve preparation of site and resistance to contaminants, which means this part basically treats on the flamboyant approach of putting buildings anywhere we like without due consideration of the current state of the site. What I mean by that, we basically need to keep people and the structure isolated from any detrimental influence of the ground and the water in the ground and all of those bad things that can be inside that ground or groundwater, which may be contaminated. We also need to think about the resistance to moisture. Well, who wants to live in a damp and deteriorating building? Unless it's a timber building and you are a wood-boring weevil, I doubt it is you. So whether it is damp ground, rain, condensation, or leaks, this should be managed and foreseen. The next requirement is requirement D, which treats about toxic substances, aka cavity insulation. That requirement goes from the problems we had in the past and are remnants of urea formaldehyde foams, which when applied within the cavity walls tended to disintegrate and tended to gas people inside their homes for years. Off to requirement E, resistance to the passage of sound. We need to assure that the comfortable living of the people within the building is sustained and that no noise or unnecessary vibration unduly impacts the occupants. So that requirement concentrates on protection against sound from other parts of the building and adjoining buildings, protection against sound within a dwelling house, and likewise reverberation, you know what I mean, the vibration that the reverberation, blah, 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 never mind that. In common internal parts of buildings containing flats or rooms for residential purposes. This sort of issues are very prevalent when you want to convert offices to flats, and when the people using those corridors may influence the feeling of people in the bedrooms just opposite the wall. This requirement also treats about acoustic conditions in schools. Off to the next one, letter F, ventilation. It is generally understood by anyone that we need to think about the quality of air within the spaces we live in, right? Yeah, and that's what this one talks and treats about. Off to requirement G, sanitation, hot water safety and water efficiency. As it says on the tin, this approved document will treat about cold water supply. The last thing we want is to appear on television as did the occupants of the city of Flint, Michigan, don't we? With their huge drinking water crisis caused by corroded pipes and leading to lead poisoning of the population. Water in our taps gotta be wholesome and safe to drink. We need to think about the water efficiency. Water is a scarce resource, although generally wasted. However, we in southeast of England, where the precipitation can be less than that of Mexico, should relate to this more than anywhere else. We need to think about the safety of hot water supply and the system. We need that hot water to clean and bathe, don't we? But we need to be sure that hot water is not too hot for the use as to cause harm to the user. We need to think about sanitary conveniences and washing facilities. Well, Victorian times are long gone and most of us enjoy cozy loos, so we need to make sure we do not spread diseases or incubate these in our houses and provide sufficient separation from food preparation areas. There are rules about bathrooms and there are rules about kitchen and food preparation areas as well, treated within that approved document. Off to requirement H, drainage and waste disposal. We need to think about how to get rid of the foul water, wastewater treatment system and cesspools. We need to know what we're going to do with rainwater drainage, what happens when we want to build but there is already a sewer system underground and we want to build over it. Ideally, we'd like to separate rainwater drainage and foul water drainage with wastewater drainage from each other. Sometimes not possible. And we need to know how to deal with solid waste storage. And this aspect's been treated within the drainage and waste disposal requirement H. After H should be I, but there's none. Document I, we go straight to document J, which treats about combustion appliances and fuel storage system. We need to think in this circumstance about how we supply the air for the combustion, how we discharge the products of that combustion, how we protect people and inform them if there is any release of carbon monoxide by those installations, how we protect the building so it doesn't catch fire from our appliances, and how we provide information about the whole system so the new appliances can be installed safely within that building. How to protect liquid fuel storage systems and how to assure that these liquids do not contaminate ground around those tanks. These are all matters that have been treated about in the document J. Approved document K treats about protection from falling, collision and impact. Things like stairs, rules around stairs, ladders, ramps in dwellings, protection from falling, vehicle bias and loading bays, protection from collision with open windows, etc. Protection against impact from entrapping by doors. Which may sound silly, but people or children sometimes die when they interact, especially with the control units that operate the doors or gates. Requires L, conservation of fuel and power. Well, all of the resources are finite and we try to use as little of them as possible and use reusable wherever possible with all of our green strategies nowadays. But the conservation of fuel and power, it's all about making sure the building is not overly impacted by cold or heat and the heating or cooling units are energy efficient within that building. That document also treats about on-site generation of electricity, which too needs proper sizing and execution. Approval document M, which talks about access to and use of buildings, where we need to think about the access and use of the buildings, don't we really? Everyone's got their own perspectives, but it is important to make buildings accessible to people of varying capabilities. We need to address access to extensions to buildings other than dwellings, sanitary conveniences and extension to buildings other than dwellings too, sanitary conveniences in dwellings in general for those people of varying capabilities. Not all of us can walk freely, not all of us have all legs or arms. We need to think about everyone and try to provide the best living solution for across the board. Off to approved document N, which deals about glazing, safety in relation to impact, opening and cleaning. It used to be the part of document K, but now forms its own part. There is no approved document published yet, but reference to the old guidance in part K can be made. The things we consider here are the things of protection against impact, manifestation of glazing. We need to see that there is a glass door in front of us, so we don't walk into it. To think about how to safely open and close windows, etc., and provide safe access for cleaning those windows, doors, roof lights, and whatnots. Approved document O treats about overheating. As it says on the tin, when building is badly designed, badly located, it will gain heat from the sun, and using AC units in all cases does not make the infrastructure better. Buildings should be conceived in the way the natural construction of the building could regulate that gain and the environment within. So use shade wherever possible, use natural ventilation wherever possible, use heat storage in a concrete or masonry within that building to regulate the temperature without using actual heating or cooling systems. Approved document P, which treats about electrical safety and talks about design and installation of low or extra low voltage installation in dwellings. Approved document Q, security, deals with unauthorized access to dwellings or flats. Approved document R talks about physical infrastructure for high-speed electronic communication networks, which is basically a convoluted way to tell you that you are connected. You should be able, or you should be connected to the network. Gigabyte ready physical infrastructure is a cable internet. So it basically means your home can connect to the network by cable. This approved document also treats about the connection to gigabit capable network. That means your house is connected to the network for you to use whenever you are ready. Clever little one, maybe unnecessary little one, but yeah, it's what it is. Approved documents treats about new buildings that should be connected to network, just in case someone would like not to connect the property to network. Nowadays, I don't know if that'd be a thing. Well, unless you're a nomad, that is. But then you don't build your house; you dig yourself a hermit house. You dig yourself a hobbit house, right? Approved document S: infrastructure for the charging of electric vehicles. It is prevalent. The industries are changing to electrification wherever we can, trying to industrialize power so it's delivered to us in a clean way, and all the bad and not so clean way of producing that power could be managed on the industrial scale. And it deals with the erection of new residential buildings, this approved document. It deals with the dwellings resulting from material change of use. It deals with residential buildings undergoing major renovation. It deals with erection of new buildings which are not residential buildings or mixed-use buildings. It also deals with buildings undergoing major renovations which are not residential buildings or mixed-use buildings, and the erection of new mixed-use buildings and mixed-use buildings undergoing major renovation. Basically, if you build or change your building, provide the charging facilities. So that'll be all with the approved documents. However, there is one more that's worth mentioning here, which generally talks about how those buildings are delivered, and its requirements following Regulation 7. So the building regulation, which basically treats on materials and workmanship. In the aspect of materials, it says how the materials need to be good and proper for the application and how to make sure they are. And on the workmanship side of things, it also talks about how the workmanship is good and proper and the ways to assure such. So here you have it. Just by giving you a simple and general overview of approved documents can make you forget your own name. Many businesses make their own offerings concerning on the selected aspects of these requirements. It is good in the general practice to start the considerations from the point of the Secretary of State and the government's understanding of what each regulation means in terms of practical application. It needs to be noted that this is not just guidance, but guidance which is treated as gospel by building control. There are 18 requirements within 17 approved documents. Requirement N hides within approved document K. For now anyway. And the additional document that deals with material and workmanship. I think it is pertinent to reiterate here the beginning of the main part of this podcast, which highlights the fact, here quoting the legislation, open quote, a failure on the part of a person to comply with an approved document does not of itself render him liable to any civil or criminal proceedings. End quote. Mind, however, dear listener, that building control officers are not legislative or architectural or engineering wizards, and they rely on tools that are presented to them by the government, in this case, this approved document and checklist of aspects conforming to it. Unfortunately, although building inspectors have no liability towards you as a client, they will insist on the use of the guidance as they have the power of veto. The only recourse from their decision is an appeal to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, the Right Honourable Michael Gove. No chance. And perhaps, if that does not help, you may like to take the government to court. Well, if you do housing projects, I doubt any of these solutions make any economical sense. Well, at least in 99% of the cases it does not. It has been a pleasure to deliver this episode to you. Thank you for listening. Let me know if this type of content is good for you. I've decided to systematize this a little bit more and follow the pattern of plan of work where I give you a high-level overview of chunky subject and then dissect it into more details with every following episode. If you think this benefits you or would like to be able to capitalize on the listening in the form of CPD certification, please do let me know and I'll open a waiting list to see if that is viable. In any case, I'll continue to deliver content to you, my dear fellow professional and dear client of mine. It is important to me and my consulting engineers practice BITNA to deliver information to you so you can make the most informed decision for yourself and to guide the practice of architecture, engineering and construction into more informed, cooperative and sustainable whole. Thank you again for listening. Please voice up your opinions. I'm waiting for you on LinkedIn and I want to hear from you. Toodaloo!